Hello, everybody, and welcome to Monday edition of the Southside Beat here on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcasting Network. My name is Chris Halicke, and to my right is Greg Macafee, currently updating our Steelers feed because more roster cuts are happening, because that is what's happening over today and tomorrow, which is Tuesday at 4 p.m. So right when the show tomorrow is supposed to begin, somehow we're gonna have to figure this out, but roster cuts. And Chuck here asks, any news except the 8 cuts? Yes, there were 3 more. Matthew Wright, one of the kickers, Kyler McMichael, which was reported earlier by ESPN. And then I believe the third one. Who was the third one again? You're putting it in there right now.
Anderson Hardy, offensive lineman.
Anderson Hardy, that's right. On the offensive line. So, those are including the 8 that were cut earlier. No surprises thus far. And of course, this early in the process, I don't think any surprises you would see right now, unless they were just getting rid of a guy that they weren't planning on keeping and wanted to give him a better chance of getting a job earlier. But still, no surprises so far when it comes to the roster cuts. But yeah, that's how we're starting the show today. For those who didn't see, yes, we're going to try to do 4 p.m. Through the week. It works the best with what the practice schedule is this week. And we'll see what happens next week whenever they actually get into the actual regular season schedule of what they're going to be doing for practice and everything like that. So, and when we get to that, or when we get past that, or when we get to tomorrow, at least, attention fan asks, are there any cut players from other teams we should get? That is the question, and I do think that that's going to happen. If you're looking for specific names, I don't have one for you right now, but I would think that there are going to be at least 1, maybe 2 additions from the outside when it comes to how this 53-man roster is going to look. Primarily at getting a gunner on special teams. I think that's a big one. And then what other position do you think that they need to be adding to, Greg?
Corner, maybe, I think would be one.
They need might be one.
After Corey Trice, they might need a little bit of depth there. I don't know if Mike Tomlin is totally sold on Beanie Bishop. So slot corner is another one. I mean, we've talked about veterans all throughout training camp that they could bring in. But I would say those 2 positions, and then maybe a little offensive line depth. We kind of talked about that. You and I kind of talked about that a little bit last night. Maybe an outside hire there or something like that as well.
Yeah. James asks, cutoff is tomorrow at midnight. No, it is tomorrow. So Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern. So when this show is supposed to start tomorrow, that's when the cutoff is. So I'm assuming that we're going to have that before 4 p.m. If we don't, we may have to push it back a little bit more and then get, obviously, I'm going to write a story tomorrow off of that final 53-man roster. Well, it's what the 53-man is going to look like. And then, break that down position by position, why so-and-so made the roster, why somebody didn't. So look for that tomorrow. Today, however, before we get into, kind of the rest of the show, had a chance to speak with Keanu Benton. It was just me and one other reporter before whole scrum showed up, but had a chance to kind of ask him about you know how that goes, man. Like if you're there with just one other person, it's completely fair game. But before a whole mass of reporters went over there, had a chance to talk with Keanu, and really, I mean, listen, like Mike Tomlin, I'm not going to say he grades his rookies on a curve. I think that's a bit unfair, but I definitely think that he doesn't try to just throw them in. There have been rare exceptions, but I don't think he just tries to throw them in. And everybody's in the comments is going to say Kendrick Green. Again, there are rare exceptions, but I think with rookies, he does try to not just hand them a gigantic role right away. And we saw that with a lot of his guys last year, if not every single one of them, because Joey Porter Jr. didn't start right away. Broderick Jones didn't start right away. But with Keanu Benton, once those guys get to year 2, if there is any grading on a curve, it's gone. And so, I wanted to play this clip here from me asking him about like, listen, you look good in training camp, you look good in preseason, do you feel like you're going to be able to here? I'll just play the clip because I don't remember exactly how I worded the question. A lot's happened since then, but definitely want to play this for you because I think this is a big thing right here when we're talking about expectations for this team. These year 2 guys are going to have to play a role. So here, listen to this from the practice earlier today.
It seems like you've really throughout the preseason, your performance has gotten a little bit better in game every single. Like last week, that first series, I know Nick got a couple of those sacks, but you were back there every single time. How do you feel like you've progressed throughout the training camp and preseason?
Just not being nervous on doing anything, just trying moves out there. Like I said, knowing the defense helps a lot. Like last year, it just kind of knocks out that thinking about what to do part and just going out there and doing it.
So this is big for this team because I also had a conversation with Montravius Adams too. A lot of these guys feel like they're freed up. They're not having to think so much, these younger guys. And that's a big thing for this team because they're really, really confident. There might not be a lot of confidence on the outside, but they're really, really confident that they're going to be able to do more. Guys like Keanu, guys like Mon. What are you getting the same vibe? Because, we've got a week until the real work begins. And so are you getting the same vibe from this team that I am? Because it seems like a lot of these guys really don't feel like they're having to be bogged down with a lot of stuff, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think Nick Herbig after Saturday's game kind of said the same type of thing. He said that he was just out there kind of just trying to have fun and trying to, play football, and everything is kind of coming a little easier this year. And I think Tomlin spoke to that as a little bit as well, that he's expecting those second-year guys to kind of take a jump. And Nick Herbig showed that. I think Keanu Benton showed that a little bit. But, I mean, even all around the team, I mean, even when the outside, the national picture being painted was that, the offense isn't in good shape. But like when you were in the locker room all last week, you could sense that there wasn't any nerves, there wasn't any concern, there wasn't anything like that. They were like, we'll be all right. We'll get the product on the field. And it will go from there. We just need to, build up a little momentum. So I don't think there's any concern. I mean, I think they're all in a good place. They all kind of have a great understanding of where they are as a team, and they're pretty confident with that.
Yeah, in terms of the Benton stuff, I'm going to have more on the site here. I'm actually kind of in the middle of writing a story on Benton specifically, but I do think that is going to be one of the things that really helps define this team. Yeah. Obviously there's some other things that have to happen. They have to get the quarterback position right. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen on offense correctly because it can't just be the defense. But in terms of these year 2 guys, and a lot of them are on defense, because, we're seeing Nick Herbig pretty much do everything that he possibly can. Like he needs a bigger role, and then Keanu Benton has continued to progress forward, and he's looking more and more like a guy who, he's starting to win more and more of his blocks. And again, being the interior guy that he is, you don't have to be a home run hitter playing on the inside the way he does, especially whenever part of the time you're lining up as a nose tackle. But, then you look at, Darnell Washington and Joey Porter Jr. even, there's already big expectations for him just because of what he did as a rookie. You look at these year 2 guys, and it's just, it is a big thing, because if these guys can continue to go on the path that they started last year, it does help solidify this team, because it was already a good contribution last year. And then it'll just make this team even better this year, not to mention all the other guys they added, both in the draft and then in free agency, and, quarterback should be better. So I get a very similar feeling of what you were saying.
Yeah. There's confidence there, and it's just
it's
not exactly seen by the outside, but there's confidence in the locker room that they'll be able to get the job done this year.
Yeah, there was some news elsewhere before, and I had a feeling this was going to come up in the show today, but there was some news elsewhere in the NFL, some pretty big news. CeeDee Lamb, his holdout in Dallas is over. He signed a 4-year, $136 million contract with $100 million guaranteed, and I think a $30 million signing bonus.
38.
$38 million. That's
Yeah.
right. $38 million signing bonus, which is a receiver record. And so of course, my first reaction to it was Brandon Aiyuk is smiling like a butcher's dog, to quote the great Mike Lang. So of course I knew this was going to come up. Matt here asks, how does the CeeDee Lamb deal change the Aiyuk trade? I don't think it necessarily changes much about it, but maybe other than the fact that Brandon can just, look at the 49ers and then be like, see, all these other guys are starting to get paid.
Yeah.
Pay me. And if the 49ers finally just throw their hands in the air and say, you know what, screw it. We're not gonna agree to terms. We feel like we've given you our best offer, and then maybe a trade happens. So maybe it lights a fire. I'm not going to say that it will, because then there was a report out there today, and I'm using the word report very, very loosely here. It says, I trust you guys. So is it true that a trade for Aiyuk happens by tomorrow? That's what I saw, but I don't know if it was clickbait or not. If you saw it on Twitter, it's probably not true. That I can say there's a lot of experts on Twitter that don't know what they're talking about, and that's not just Brandon Aiyuk specific. That is, there are a couple of people that really do claim to be experts and are actually quite good at some of the things that they do, that are just absolutely convinced that there's a quarterback competition in Pittsburgh, and there's just not.
Yeah.
There never has been. This has been a thing for 3 years now. Like, there just hasn't been a quarterback competition, and I digress. But either way, I don't think there's a deadline on this. I don't think it has to be by the 53-man cut down. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it has to be, but I think you would like to be. I mean, I think you would like to have it done before that 53-man date, but I don't think it has to be at all. I think obviously we've seen Omar Khan. He wants to be as patient as possible. He wants to. He's not going to make a deal unless it works for the Steelers. We said that all along. So I think he'll wait this out as long as he needs to. And if it comes to a point where he doesn't feel like the deal's going to get done, I think it's time to move on at this point, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I don't know, man. It's just, hold on. Let's see. Spice Creation says, I hear Aiyuk and Shanahan got in each other's face. They don't get along. There does seem to, the one thing that you can say, and I don't cover the 49ers, so I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend that I know what's going on there.
Yeah.
But the one thing that you can see often, because, Aiyuk's not the only one doing a hold in or hold out, whatever it is. Trent Williams is also holding out. And every time he's asked about Trent Williams, there's
a little more positive.
There's optimism. There's optimism. Oh yeah, I'm confident we're going to be we're getting close, and then every time he's asked about Aiyuk, it's just not worded that way. There is a stark difference in the way that he answers those questions. So it wouldn't surprise me if that happened. And Spice Creation says it came from a San Francisco reporter, and that would not surprise me whatsoever if there is bad blood between Aiyuk and Shanahan. But all I do know is that in terms of what's actually going on, and this is why we haven't really talked about it, is because nothing's changed. The 49ers are still trying to sign Aiyuk long-term.
Yeah.
And that is still their priority. They would rather that this play out that way. They would, if they had their way, they would get Aiyuk to sign the contract that they've offered. If that can't happen, if they cannot come to terms with Brandon Aiyuk, the 49ers and Steelers have a framework in place to do a trade, and he would most likely become a Steeler at that point, unless some other team happened to jump in. There's been some noise about the Commanders, but I'm very, very skeptical of that, just because of what I've heard, that the 49ers don't want to trade within the NFC when it comes to that. So I'm still 50-50 at this point. It really could go either way. Back to some Steelers stuff. Rico comes in with a $10 contribution, which I appreciate. And he asks, what's the word on Roman Wilson and Fautanu? We saw Roman Wilson today, Greg.
Yeah. Yeah, we did. He was kind of running back and forth, doing some stretches and stuff on the sideline. When he spoke briefly last week, he said that he'd be back soon. So I would assume that he's starting to work his way back. He's gaining a lot more confidence in that ankle and everything like that. But he was running back and forth on the sideline. He looked decent. But yeah, I would say the process is continuing for him to come back in some way, shape, or form in the near future.
Yeah, the best way I can put that, if you're looking for a timeline, is that Jaylen Warren today said that he expects to play week 1.
Mm-hmm.
And Roman Wilson and Jaylen Warren were doing kind of the equivalent of participation. I want to say participation of doing like the light activity in practice.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say Roman Wilson's going to play week 1. There's been no designation when it comes to that, but is it possible? I think it's possible right now. I'm a little more skeptical about Roman just because he's a rookie. I don't think there's a lot of, especially if a trade does happen, if they do land Aiyuk or any other receiver in a trade, then maybe there's no reason to rush him back. So I'm just a little bit more skeptical when it comes to that. But Jaylen Warren, I think just based off of what he said, and I would be a little bit more inclined to think that he's going to play.
Yeah, I mean during the I will say
during
the open parts of practice that Jaylen Warren did look a little bit better than Roman Wilson in terms of just kind of moving around and running and things of that nature. So I would say he's probably closer to a return than Roman, but Jaylen also said that, he expects to play September 8th.
Right. James B asks, what about Corey Trice groin injury? I think he spoke today too, and he's sounding pretty confident about being able to play in week 1. I don't think any of these guys have any major injuries, and this week is a really good week for them to really get a lot of rest because they have 3 practices this week. So, the first one was today. The next 2 are over the next 2 days, Tuesday and Wednesday, and they're all the same format pretty much, which is it's a you saw the pictures on our site. There were no pads today. It was a light practice. I would expect the same thing to happen, pretty much the equivalent of a Friday practice. So, and then there's 4 days off in a row. They're off Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I expect this to be a good week until, like the title of the episode says, until the real work begins, because next week they will show up on Monday, on Labor Day, ironically enough, and really get to work in terms of preparing for the Atlanta Falcons. And and Spice Creation says, Trice said he just felt tightness. Yeah, when these type of injuries happen, it's the same thing with Joey Porter Jr., even though like his injury really hasn't been disclosed. There seems to be no concern as of right now over any of these injuries. It's just they are being overly cautious. And and for good reason. You don't want any of these guys missing extended time because you tried to force them to play in a preseason game. There's just no good reason for that. Mr. CJ Jr. asks, any surprise cuts for tomorrow? I don't think there's going to be anything that's going to completely rock anyone's world, but I think there are always a couple of cuts that kind of raise some eyebrows. I would be a little surprised if they didn't keep 4 tight ends. Pretty much.
Yeah.
I really do feel confident that group is going to be Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, Connor Hayward, and Michael Pruitt. Just because I don't think Jack Coletto makes it. I felt that way early in camp, and just seeing the lack of ability on special teams, it's really made me go back on that. So I don't know. What about you, Greg? Like, I can't think of anybody that's going to be like, oh, holy crap, I cannot believe he didn't make it. I do think that just about everybody who's cut, it's going to be like, okay, well, I can see that. But there's still probably going to be a few names where we're like, oh, I thought he had a really good shot at it and just didn't make it.
Yeah. I'm really curious to see where they go, or like how deep they go with wide receiver. I feel like Dez Fitzpatrick has kind of come on as of late over the last week. Like, I feel like he's kind of jumped Quez Watkins in a way. And then I'm also curious at what they do at nickel. What they do at cornerback. Obviously, we've talked about Beanie Bishop. Thomas Graham has been there as well. I don't know if either of those players. I mean, I think Yeah, I feel like Beanie might make it, but I mean, I feel like it also depends if they bring in someone from the outside as well. But I think for the most part, it's pretty straightforward until you get very far down the depth chart in a way, in terms of at wide receiver, in terms of defensive linemen. Like, I think there are a couple spots at both of those positions, offensive linemen, where it's going to be like this guy or this guy, or like for example, Logan Lee or Isaiah Loudermilk at defensive line, guys like that.
Yeah, if Logan Lee, he has an undisclosed injury too, and so if he is like not deemed healthy, or the Steelers aren't confident that he can be healthy, I don't think they would waste like an IR designated to return spot.
Yeah.
For a 6th rounder that still has a lot to prove. So that might be a guy who is cut and in favor of like Isaiah Loudermilk or somebody like that. So if I had to pick a surprise cut based off of what we've seen this training camp, because we got that question here, Brian asks, who are your surprise cuts? If I had to choose one, I would actually say Beanie Bishop.
Yeah.
Which I understand he's an undrafted free agent. So there's not a lot of like, oh, wow, shocker, you picked the undrafted free agent as a surprise cut. I don't think he's going to get cut, but it wouldn't completely shock me if he did, just because it does seem like Mike Tomlin prefers just about everybody else who's trying out for that spot over him.
See, I was thinking about that like last week into this week. Do you think that's Tomlin's, one of those games Tomlin's playing just because of the way Beanie Bishop carries himself? He's always working, chip on the shoulder, things of that nature, and Tomlin's kind of playing into that a little bit to, get the most out of him he can.
I don't think he does that with rookies.
Yeah.
I don't think he does that with rookies. I feel like when it comes to the way he treats rookies, it is very, very much you have to earn your spot. And he's even said multiple times, like, he's going to earn his spot.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree.
I'm not saying he can't earn a spot. And I'm not saying that, tomorrow Beanie Bishop is going to get cut. I'm just saying it wouldn't surprise me if he's among the cuts. I don't think it's going to happen. If you're making me like say, you're betting your life savings, is Beanie Bishop going to get cut or not? I'm probably going to say no, he's probably on the 53. But it wouldn't surprise me, just because I feel like Thomas Graham has had a couple of games now where he's been able to show what he can do.
Yeah.
And Darius Rush might make the roster just because of his ability to be a depth corner and to play on special teams. Corey Trice isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about cornerbacks that can make the team, you're running out of room, because if everything's okay with Ryan Watts, like, I feel like he deserves a roster spot over Beanie Bishop.
That's what I was going to ask. So, he was going to be the next guy that I was going to ask about, Ryan Watts. I mean, do you think he's done enough? I mean, I put him on my roster projection last night just because I felt like I was so divided there of, whether he makes the team or not. And because I felt like he's done enough to find a roster spot.
Well, you can, if you want to put defensive backs, I mean, let's just list these guys out. Let's just say defensive backs, there are 10 roster spots, because typically it's 4 safeties and then 6 corners. Now, one of those corners can be like a corner hybrid, like corner safety hybrid or whatever. Yeah. And I think Watts is more in line as a safety, but he can play some corner too. Okay. Let's just list these out. Let's get the obvious ones out of the way. Minkah Fitzpatrick, Deshaun Elliott, DeMonte Casey, and then Miles Killebrew. Those 4 safeties are definitely making like that. That's
hands down, no doubt. Yeah.
Then at corner, you have Joey Porter Jr., Dante Jackson. We're at 6 out of 10. And we're just talking about the 4 safeties and the 2 starting outside corners.
Yeah.
Then again, Corey Trice is going to make it. So that's 7. Then, okay, from there, you're talking about, Ryan Watts, Darius Rush and Thomas
Beanie-
Graham.
Yeah, or Beanie Bishop. Yeah.
Or Beanie Bishop. Like that's what I'm saying. Like it would not surprise me if Beanie Bishop was cut.
Yeah. And I was kind of going back and forth last night when I was writing that article, and I was like, I just feel like Beanie Bishop's kind of almost not necessarily had the upper hand, but like had a little bit of an edge up until this last week when he was held out of practice. And I think his status is kind of up in the air, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Joshua Dobbs here says Sutton, and then he says eventually. Yeah. Yes, eventually, but he will not have to start on the 53 because of his suspension. So he will be put on a restricted list while he is suspended. So for those 8 games that he's suspended, he is not taking up a spot on the 53-man roster. So you don't have to figure Sutton into the mix now, but in 8 games you will.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. Like you've got 7 that are pretty much locks,
and
then from there on, you can make an argument for 3 or 4 guys. So, I would say definitely for 4 guys, and so that's what I'm saying. Beanie Bishop, it would not surprise me. But this is what happens over Monday and Tuesday. Before the first week of preparation for the NFL season. This is what you're going to see. These are not easy days, by the way. There's a lot of time that fans will sit here and be like, yeah, this guy's he's a waste of space. He needs to go. Like these are guys who are losing their jobs. This is not easy. When it comes to roster cuts, and here's a good one too, because when we talk about defensive line depth earlier with Keanu Benton, Mon Adams, these guys, Jerry brings up DeMarvin Leal. I'm not going to call him a lock at this point, but I think he's had a training camp and preseason good enough in which that would be a surprise cut to me. I would be shocked if DeMarvin Leal is cut tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I feel like he's had a great training camp. He's gotten a lot of praise from the coaches. He's in great shape. He's shown his versatility both at outside linebacker and on special teams and everything like that. Like he's done what he's needed to do to get a roster spot. So yeah, he's one of the guys I would be surprised if he didn't make the roster.
Yeah. J Mars says, have a good pod, just starting it from the start. So go hard, guys. Appreciate it. And then he says, how was practice? Like these practices are very, very they're not very intense. These practices, like leading up, this is kind of, if you want to talk about another calm before the storm, this is kind of the calm before the storm. This is like the week where you get a little bit of work in just to keep everything a little bit fresh, to keep the schemes and everything fresh. And then you get 4 days off. Yeah. So they're not big. There's not a lot happening in practice. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
So,
agreed.
And Jim says Loudermilk would be cut before Leal. I would agree with that too.
Yeah,
I think when you're talking about defensive line, I think Loudermilk is on the edge. I do think he has a chance, especially if there is an injury with Logan Lee and Jordan here says Loudermilk looked a little bit better. I do think Loudermilk has had a pretty decent camp in preseason. I'm not going to say that he's really shown, a lot in which you're kind of like the way DeMarvin Leal has, where it's like, okay, all right, that dude's probably going to be on the roster. I don't feel that way about Loudermilk, but overall, I do think he's at least made a name he's done enough to at least have his name be considered for the 7th guy in that room. I'll put it that way. Let's see. We're kind of near the end of the time here, so we want to wrap this thing up. Do you guys have any other questions? Throw them into the chat real quick before we get out of here. Just a reminder for everyone who wasn't on the show earlier, tomorrow, Tuesday, 4 p.m. is the deadline for these roster cut downs. So the Steelers roster will go along with the other 31 teams. They will go from 90 to 53. Lots of guys losing their jobs. And that is also how, the Steelers and other teams can also address some needs. Maybe they want to go to the outside for a gunner. Maybe they want to go to the outside for that 9th offensive lineman, who I do think that is probably the most likely scenario when it comes to the offensive line. Maybe they want to go get somebody for slot corner. You never know. There will be surprise cuts throughout the league, and the Steelers might try to take advantage of that. So Mr. CJ Jr. asks, is Plumlee going to make it through waivers? That versatility, man. I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me. It would not surprise me in the least if Plumlee is actually snagged before the Steelers can stash him on the practice squad. It wouldn't surprise me, because maybe somebody wants a guy who can be quarterback one snap and return a kick another snap and even play a little receiver another snap. Like, maybe, I don't know. But the one thing that I said it during the final preseason game is that, man, I cannot remember a return in which Plumlee just didn't die at the end. It just seems like he's getting just absolutely demolished every single time he returns the ball.
It's very funny to watch. But he's been all over the place. I think he would be great to have on the practice squad, but like you said, he's shown so much through training camp, like in terms of versatility. He's returned punts, he's returned kicks, he's played quarterback, and he's played wide receiver. He hasn't played wide receiver in a game, but just doing that, I think, he's doing whatever he can to, to find a spot somewhere.
A couple of questions here. We'll go with this one, and then we'll go with one more. Robert asks, who is the 4th running back? So obviously we know the top 3 running backs are Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, and Cordarrelle Patterson. Patterson obviously is the number 3. I think there was a lot of talk early on that somebody else could possibly leapfrog him because he wasn't healthy. And no, dude, Cordarrelle Patterson is the number 3 back, and he will get some snaps, but I do think he will primarily be a kick returner. Then when it comes to the 4th running back, I think if everybody's healthy, that Jonathan Ward probably has the best chance. He definitely was the one favored the most out of the rest of the running backs throughout camp. He did have an injury here lately, so maybe they go with a healthier guy. Maybe they go with LaMichael Pirine. Maybe they go with Shampklin or any of these guys. Edwards is not there. He was one of the guys who was cut earlier today, the undrafted free agent that was signed out of Georgia. So maybe they can stash one of these guys on the practice squad. But if you're asking for a 4th running back on the 53-man roster, I highly doubt there will be a 4th running back on the 53-man. If there is a 4th running back, it's going to be they'll be on the practice squad. So, and get a comment here saying Edwards is going to be on the practice squad. That wouldn't surprise me either.
Yeah.
If that does happen, maybe they just cut him early to try to give him a chance to get a job. If that doesn't happen, then they could stash him on the practice squad. And then final question here. This is a crapshoot to me, but if we want to try to take a stab at it, Jordan asks, who do you guys see making the practice squad? I want to try to answer that for you, but I think I can speak for both Greg and I. But I'll let you take a stab at it, Greg, if you want to. It's just so much of a crapshoot because it could be guys internally, but there could also be 4 or 5 guys that are brought in from the outside. You just never know.
Yeah. The one guy that kind of comes to my mind if he doesn't make the final roster, Quez Watkins, maybe. He's a guy
snagged somewhere though.
Yeah, he could get picked up somewhere. Plumlee, obviously we've talked about him already. I'm just trying to kind of rack my brain to see if there's anyone out there that I don't know. I mean, it's so tough.
That answer is honestly probably the best way to answer it because it just is a big gigantic crapshoot. Because listen, there are 90 guys. Let's actually do the math here, okay? There are 90 guys on each roster right now. Well, not right now because there are already guys who are cut, but at the beginning of this, 90 on 32 teams. That is 2,880 players. Okay. So each team, so that's 2,880. Everybody remember that number. So let's do 32 times 53. That is 1,696. So we have 2,880 minus 1696. There are 1,184 guys who are going to be told you are not making the team.
Yeah.
That's a lot of guys that you have to try to comb through.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons why front offices are in the NFL are so large. Because there's a lot of things to monitor.
It's like, I mean, like there are guys who aren't going to make the roster that you would like to see on the practice squad, but you know, there's also going to be other teams around the league that probably have the same amount of interest in them as the Steelers do, and they're going to try to possibly give them a roster spot instead of a practice squad spot. So it's almost impossible to just be like, oh yeah, like he'll be on the practice squad, because you never know who's going to come calling for him.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the reasons why when you're making like a 53-man prediction, you know, like we've tried to do, you kind of have to account like, okay, this is not going to be 100% because there will be guys. I will be shocked if the 53-man roster tomorrow doesn't have any external additions.
Yeah.
Because it happens almost every year. So I do think that there will be a name or two that are added kind of at the last minute that they kind of, oh, this guy's getting cut. Okay, that's our new gunner. Oh, this guy's getting cut. That's our 9th offensive lineman. You know, just because, you know, when you look at offensive line, like, yeah, that's going to be that like they don't have anybody right now that automatically stands out because of, you know, obviously, you know, Dylan Cook is going to be out for several weeks and Nate Herbig just went on IR. Like, you've got guys that you need to, all the other guys are like, there's nobody who's kind of like, yeah, that guy, that's guys on the roster. It's more like, no, I don't think so. Not really done much. Yeah. So, yeah. And really, really good question here. If you want to talk about a practice squad guy, Welshoff, man, Julius Welshoff, he's gotten better and better over the course of preseason. He's interesting to me. So maybe that's an edge rusher they can stash, but either way, we're going to hop off for today. We will try to figure out what we're going to do with the show tomorrow. It depends on when the final cuts do come through, what signings go through. If we have to cancel the show or do it like an hour later or something, I don't know. We'll see. But right now, show is scheduled for 4:00 tomorrow. That is the deadline for the roster cutoff. So, or roster cut down. So we'll see. But really appreciate you guys tuning in, for listening. And we'll be back hopefully tomorrow. But either way, for the rest of the week, for sure, we'll definitely be on. So appreciate you guys. Catch you on the flippity flip.
See you later, guys.